Inbox Awesome. And as I said before, we're curating this conference, or trying to curate it in a way that we really talk to a lot of people and ask, what do you want to see on stage? Like, what should we really be talking about? And one topic that came up frequently and that we try to pull together by having, some Gen Zennial knowing people on stage were influencers. The influencers are changing marketing by basically replacing the middleman. And especially in the messaging world, we'll take a close look at Instagram. On this panel, there's a lot happening that you should know about. We also have someone here on stage shortly that has, I think, in the 300,000 or 400,000 followers on Instagram, is basically living off that platform. So I'm very excited to bring on stage Gabby from SoulCycle, Noah from Havas, Dave Krugman, photographer, Brandon from Gramlist, Avner from Public, and Naomi from Shine. Naomi, where are you? I haven't seen you in the last couple of minutes. Let's see when she comes. Maybe she found the after party that we were prepping. Wow, this is the panel so far. That's cool. Hey, hi guys. All right. So who is taking a look at for Naomi? Hey Mara, do you know where Naomi is? Can you? Oh, she's on the rooftop. Oh, she's coming. All right, cool. All right. Well, maybe we can start with you guys before the other panelists arrive. I mean, you guys know quite a lot about this space, and I'm sure you can give it a kickstart. And we basically were trying to find out today what is changing in marketing and what personalization and influencers have to do with it. Maybe you can kick it off, and then we'll greet the other panelists once they come back from the rooftop.
I'll be the moderator for now. So
cool. Oh, there she is. Hey, Naomi. No worries. Here's your mic.
I just want to make a very grand entrance. Hi, guys.
Hey.
How's everyone doing? Good. All right. End of day. Excited?
So just make sure it's
yes.
pointed
All
right.
right. Great. So I'll do a quick introduction. Hi.
I was sitting inside. I'm next. You don't want me on. I'm next. I'm 5:45. This is not the final. Nice to see everybody anyway.
For me?
You got it, Dave.
Hey, Dave.
Hey.
All right. So I'll just give a quick background on myself and then give the panelists a chance to introduce themselves, and then we can jump into it. So I'm Naomi. I am the co-founder of Shine with Mara, who spoke earlier today. And Shine makes personal development easier and more accessible through technology. And, oh, I got it. Thanks, Lars. Yeah, thanks, though. Appreciate it. Prior to co-founding Shine, I worked at DoSomething.org, which was one of the largest organizations for young people in social change, and I was a chief marketing officer there. And while I was there, I was pretty instrumental in helping us build out, basically firing our agency and bringing all of talent relations in-house. And when we say talent relations, we would work with a lot of celebrities that were the traditional celebrities as we think about them, but a lot of them were influencers. And so for the last 5 years, I've spent time really thinking about the power of this new wave of celebrity. So before we kick it off, I just want to have a sense from the audience where you're coming from. Who here has actually, hi Erica, who here has actually worked with influencers before? They've already kind of gotten their feet wet. It's something their companies regularly do. Okay, like 2. So most people are interested in figuring out where to start and haven't really done it before, is that right? Okay, cool. All right, just to give you guys a sense of where people are coming from. Do you want to kick it off and give a little background before we go into questions? Everyone can just
Yeah, sure. My name's Dave Krugman. On Instagram is where I put most of my work. On Instagram, it's dave.krugman. And on Twitter, it's an underscore instead, which is not best practices, by the way. But I'm a photographer. When I was younger, I always wanted to be a photographer. My family was very encouraging of that tendency, but my schooling, everyone said don't go into the arts. Like there's not a future for you there. You're not going to make any money. And then
I feel like parents have never said that before, right?
yeah. But then social media came along, and specifically Instagram came along, and I think it really showed me that there is this whole new world of content and advertising and marketing where there's a lot of room for creativity. So I kind of this is the fast forward version, but I started to use Instagram a lot and connect with brands and build teams of creatives for brands to tackle the challenge of social storytelling. That took me into the advertising world. I was the social editor at BBDO, New York, which is a great agency in Midtown. And since then, I've gone freelance, and I kind of, I work with brands to showcase their stories and share them with the followers that I've built on my page. And I guess that's
Great.
the short version, yeah.
Thanks, Dave. Noah?
Hi there. I work in advertising. I lead a paid social team in Boston. And I would say that probably 2 years ago, 1% of the projects we would work on were influencers. And probably now it's about 30%. So this is definitely something that's growing. And pretty much every one of our clients in every vertical is interested in finding the middle ground between their voice and their message from from a brand perspective, and really speaking in the language of the people via an influencer or an advocate.
Great, thanks, Noah.
Hi, I'm Brandon Perlman from the Gramlist, and I started my career as a magazine editor. I was at InStyle, W, Women's Wear Daily, Departures, so a lot of the luxury, lifestyle, and travel publications. So I also started my career as a photographer, and my parents were not very jazzed about that, so I had to find different ways in. Let's see. So Departures was owned by American Express, so the only way you can get a Departures magazine is if you have an Amex Platinum or Centurion card, which means that it is one of the most coveted lists of high net worth individuals under the sun. So this
Was Trump on the list or no?
Oh, I can't tell you that. But I will tell you that Bombardier Jets is the #2 expenditure for most of those. It's very interesting. So taught a lot about data-driven journalism. So even though the editorial staff had total autonomy, what everybody wrote about was dictated by the spend preferences of the cardholders. So very cool. 2008, I left the magazine world behind at the end of the good days of being at magazines, and started a media company with my best friends called Stylecaster and the Stylecaster Media Group. There were 4 properties. We grew that to about 15 million uniques and sold that in August 2014 to She Knows Media that packaged us up into a much larger vertical, and started the Gramlist about 18 months ago after consulting for a variety of different social analytics platforms, and just kept hearing this thing over and over again that people wanted new influencers, but they would only work with you if you had more than 1 million followers, which didn't really make any sense to me, because when you looked at the data, engagement was incredibly low, often less than 1%. So I figured, well, what if you could flip the paradigm, and instead of working with one expensive, inauthentic person with low engagement rate, what if you could work with 20 people or 100 people with 10,000 followers? So then it just kind of came about tranching together the right hyper-targeted groups of people, and we've since built technology to do that and help discern that, and our core product is selling these lists and activating brand needs with authentic content creators.
Thanks, Brandon. Avner?
And I'm Avner. I'm from a company called Public here in New York, and we're more on the platform side. So what Public does is a new type of messaging platform for group chats where the conversations are public, hence the name. So it's like using iMessage or WhatsApp for a group conversation, but you're not doing it privately with your friends. You can have an audience. So people can see the conversation. They can't jump in, but they can ask questions or react or comment. So it's taking kind of the user experience of WhatsApp with the index graph of Twitter and creating a new platform. Basically, if you're more than one person and you want to have a social presence, we believe that's an authentic way of doing it. So we are on the platform side, but we're starting to work with influencers who are the ones having the conversations on the platform, learning a lot in the process about teenagers, which
It's always fun.
yes, enlightening.
Great. Thank you all. So I have some interesting research just to kick it off. 67% of marketing professionals worldwide reported using influencers for content promotion. And this is from an eMarketer research survey that was done last year. And 59% reported using influencer marketing tactics for product launches and content creation. So obviously this is a huge market, which is exciting and why we're all here, but it can also be really intimidating and can be hard to figure out where to start. So what would be some of the best practices for getting your feet wet and starting outreach to influencers? This is open to everyone.
I'll start. Just know who you're going after. Be as targeted as possible. Everyone breaks down into either a category, an affinity, or a location. And you can either target category, affinity, or location, or you can target them all together. So think of it kind of like a crosshair, and you can figure out exactly who you want to target. And Gabby is here.
Hi, Gabby.
So yeah, know exactly who you want to target, and don't be lured by vanity metrics like follower count. It doesn't mean anything.
And just to add some interesting semantics onto that, I know you talk a lot, Brandon, about micro-influencers. So kind of in terms of knowing where to start and not having to feel like it's like the biggest. Oh no, we'll go to you now. I was just to think through the different terminology that you can kind of take back to the office. So there's like the typical influencers, like everyone wants to work with like the huge YouTube stars, but micro influencers could be hyper targeted to the soul cycle that is in your local neighborhood that will really convert. But Noah, did you want to speak to some of the other strategies?
Yeah, in terms of where to get started, I think trying to create a behavior is really difficult, if not impossible. But if you start by observing how people are talking about your product, about your brand, whether it's social listening, whether it's going on Twitter, whether it's going into message boards, what you basically want to do is see what people are saying and try to amplify the things that are favorable or the things that are aligned with maybe what your objective is. So whether it's putting paid dollars behind someone else's tweet, whether it's reaching out to that person and saying, hey, I'm going to send you a bunch of free stuff. I mean, there's a lot of tactics, but you almost want to, again, amplify what's already being done versus trying to start on a blank sheet and cross your fingers and hope it works.
Just from an artist standpoint, it's kind of a different form of marketing where the people that have these audiences, they know their audiences best in terms of what that audience is expecting and why a follower is following them. So when you're working with these people, I think the best thing you can do is give them a creative brief, give them the guidelines, but let them run free and do their thing, because otherwise you're doing interruptive advertising. You're interrupting their natural behavior, and their followers are going right past it. It takes 2 seconds to skip over something. So let them decide how to incorporate your story into their narrative, and you'll get more successful return on that.
And Gabby, did you want to introduce yourself really quick?
Hi, I'm so sorry. I'm Gabby. I head up PR and brand strategy for SoulCycle. And I've known Brandon for years.
How do you all define success? So sometimes influencers, because it can feel new to a lot of companies, it can feel riskier. How do you make sure that you're mapping it back to KPIs, and in your own campaigns that you've done, how have you actually qualified that it was successful?
We have a really easy metric. It's called butts on bikes. And so we can really identify if projects or programs are working or not by the increase of ridership.
I love it.
Do you call it B.O.B.?
We haven't, but I come from hotels, so it was heads in beds or butts on bikes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And to your point, one of the things that I think is really cool about what SoulCycle does is they don't want to tell you what to post. Just by surely posting the fact that you're there is kind of endemic to what you're doing anyway, and finding those individuals and cohorting them and finding more of them is kind of the amazing thing. And what we'll tell a lot of our clients is that, well, what should we tell them? Let's go to their creative brief. Let's align on a creative brief. We have a tool that can extract the most engaged images from the last 365 days. So if we can look at that, well, that tells me two things. One, the numbers don't lie. So these are the most engaged images in the last year. So it means their audience is responding to them. And it's also very easy to point to one of those pictures and say, hey, that photo of a delicious looking donut tabletop shot from above, we want more things like that. And because it's endemic to what they're creating anyway, and it's actually pulled from an influencer's feed, and you have the knowledge that not only did it perform well, but they know that it performed well, it's completely frictionless as far as getting the exact right type of creative that you want.
I think if you publish a bunch of work and then afterwards start asking the question of what does success look like, you have a big problem. Because you should have defined what success is before you even started the project. That's the point of strategy. So typically with our influencer campaigns, we do have a specific metric. We're trying to drive engagement. We're looking at cost per engagement. Even if you're not buying the engagements, you paid the influencer, you got the engagements, you can just do, you can do the math. Sadly, sometimes with bigger influencers, almost celebrity scale influencers, it ends up being a cost per impression kind of play. I'm not a fan of that. Yeah. Sometimes clients ask for that. I think that's a waste of money. But really, I think it comes down to what's the goal? What are you trying to do? Are you trying to get people, into your spin studio? Are you trying to get people to sign up to your email list? And then build a campaign that supports that goal.
And how do you get the influencer on board for that? That's something that we're always working with, at Shine, because obviously you're like, okay, we are going to put the spend. We don't want it to be cost per impression. We want it to be on conversions, but it's a sensitive, relationship in that you're dealing with a person. They're also a media property, but they're also a person. And so what are conversations that you all have had to get them on board so you're both aware of what success looks like, so you can determine at the end if it was successful, and there'll be clarity around why or why not?
We are very different, I think, from most other organizations or companies in that we've never paid. We don't pay to play, but we have currency. So we work with that currency, which is classes and clothing. That being said, we'd much rather you become an organic fan and then post, and we want to become friends with you. We want to invite you into Ride. We want you to organically love SoulCycle and then post about it. So we start slow. We like to go on a very long date versus, want to make out with you on the first date. And that's really our approach to how we work with influencers is we invite you in, we give you classes, we have you invite your friends, we want you to become a fan of the brand, we're experiential, and then maybe we'll ask you to do something for us, but only once you've become a fan. We're not going and saying, will you do this for us, without even ever trying a class.
Fantastic. Long game, yeah. Avner?
Yeah, actually, in our case, we have no buts maybe on subways maybe, but the way we reach out to influencers, we want them to actually use the product. So if they just tweet about it or post on Instagram about it, it's almost useless for us because they're fans. The reason they would be interested is if they're on the platform actually using it and using it authentically, and for good or bad. In our case, they can't have their social media manager do it for them. They have to be the one chatting with their friends or crew or entourage, whatever. And then, the other thing we found is that it's not enough for them to be on the platform. If they don't tweet about it or post on Instagram on a continuing basis, it's very hard for the audience to find it, just because, the life of a tweet or the life of a post on Instagram is not that long. What we had most success with is when people put it on their profile information, on their YouTube description page, on their Twitter bio, on their Instagram bio. So it had a consistent presence, and then for them to be there. As soon as they're not using it, their fans don't care.
Great. For you, Dave, I wanted to ask around the influencer perspective, because you've both been at the agency and you're also a photographer and an influencer. What are the complete turnoffs in terms of things that influencers get asked or approaches that companies make that you're like, hell no?
That's a good question.
Thanks,
so I have my email in my bio because I think that's a very good way to have a persistent kind of lead. So I get a lot of emails all the time. I think the worst thing that you can do when approaching somebody like me is to send a form email that's clearly just copy and pasted, and then either call me Mrs. Krugman or like just totally miss who I am as a human being, I immediately will, you're going straight to my trash can. You wouldn't believe how many people make that mistake. I think another thing is that I get at least 6 emails a day, somebody like offering to send me a pair of socks if I'll put it up on my Instagram feed. And just know that you're approaching somebody who, depends on the, yeah. Like, I have socks, guys, thank you, but just know that you're entering and you're asking for somebody to do something for you, and make sure that you're approaching them with something that has enough value to them that they're not gonna immediately dismiss you and put you in the discard pile with everybody else. And then to hammer it again, like that creative control. I've had brands approach me and offer me, good money to put up a post that I won't do because they want me to do a logo overlay over my photography in a way that's, again, interruptive, not authentic, has nothing to do with the style that I'm interested in working with. And then, the opposite example of that, when I am given that creative control, all of my followers and fans that are seeing that this brand is actually enabling me become more loyal to that brand, and they start to actually move over, and that's where you actually see conversion and excitement around the brand or the product, is when they're like, oh, this brand is making it possible for this artist that I like to do that work that they do. So just think about how, as a brand, how you can be a part of the conversation, enable the conversation maybe, and just don't be invasive to this like little space that people take every day. So
Great. Yeah, Noah?
I would just add, we were talking about trust in the last panel with email. There's sort of an expectation that's set, and you're consistent, and someone gets your emails or your Instagram posts every week. And if you are going to endorse a product or speak to a product, that brand is basically borrowing your trust, borrowing your authenticity. And if they don't respect you, and they don't respect that that's the deal, and that comes across, you're going to say, hey, I'm not going to vouch for you. I mean, it's that simple. I mean, if someone said, hey, can you call up this person and make an intro for me and vouch for me? I mean, it's the same thing. If you don't believe in them, you're not going to do it.
Right.
Just really quickly, a great example of this, just to give you something tangible to look at. I did a partnership recently with Sony Alpha, these cameras, and they could have had us just talk about the camera on the feed, or hey, we're shooting with Sony's, blah blah blah. But they're like, why don't we pay for you guys to go to the national parks and just like, we're gonna cover everything, we're gonna get you there, we're gonna pay you, we're gonna make this situation possible. Then meanwhile, there's 10 of us, each of us has hundreds of thousands of followers. Then everybody who's following us gets to see that this is a brand that actually, they didn't just pay us and we give them a shout out. They created this entire storyline, this actual narrative that they got to live alongside with us. And
Right.
the whole time we're responding to people, who are asking us questions in real time. And advertising is about telling a brand story, right? I think the easiest, most cost-efficient, and best way to do it, make a real story, and then just have people cover it on social media.
I love that. Brandon, I loved in our prep call the way that you were talking about these micro-influencers and rising stars. And I think it's so important because as influencers have become more adopted, they advance, like you said, Noah, to almost their own celebrityness where they're no longer accessible. So how do you actually spot these rising stars? Like, what are some ways that people in the audience can go back and really understand where to start and spot these people to start those early relationships?
So first off, check out the Gramlist.com because there's a huge archive there of like 200 stories over the last year of like any potential category or geography you can think of. So you can start there. But so our focus is on influencers with a follower count of between 2,000 and 100,000 followers. And I realize that is a huge range, but you have really the complete diaspora of anything you could want in that range. Every day, thousands of people are leaving that range, and every day, hundreds of thousands are entering that range. So it's an inexhaustible supply of individuals. Being able to find whoever you want to ask them to do whatever you want. Can we go higher? Yes. Can we go lower? Absolutely. And in fact, when you go lower, something very exciting happens, especially when it comes to college markets. College students on average, if you have a public account, which by the way is only half of them, you have somewhere between 500 and 1,000 followers, which is pretty low. But then when you look at their engagement rate, their engagement is like 40 or 50%. And that just happens, that's a factor of the viral network of being a student. The social pressure of having to like or follow or comment on someone else's photo. So if you wanted to find a hyper-local brand advocate for whatever it could be, I would say start with college markets first. Clue number 2, if you have the word influencer in your profile, you are not. It is like the biggest turnoff. Whenever we reach out to somebody, if somebody reaches back out to us, like CCing my agent, don't care about you. So, but we also are developing very interesting technologies that can start to cohort influence. So imagine like Pandora for influencers. If you wanted to find one fitness individual in the specific market who might have an affinity as a mother or an entrepreneur and have certain metrics, well, we can turn that person into about 10 others automatically. So it's just, like I said before, know really who you want to look at, and then you can start to kind of map it your own way from there.
Great. Do you all have examples of epic fails that you've done in terms of influencers? So just a time it wasn't aligned, or you had a lot of hopes for conversion and it fell completely flat. But any learnings from failure is always fun.
Yeah, I would say the reason for every failure is basically we have a client, a brand that's not willing to give up control, and they're overly prescriptive and they force the hand, and we reach out to 20 people and 15 of them say, no way, I'm not doing that, and the 5 who do are just doing it for the money. So there's one example where we worked with bloggers. They wrote relatively short form, written work with some photos. I think we ended up doing 10 articles, and it just didn't resonate. It wasn't authentic. You're reading it, and the whole time it just read like an advertisement. And if you want to do that, then take out an advertisement. So, it wasn't an utter failure, but no one felt really good about it. I think it was a lose-lose-lose for the brand, for the agency, and unfortunately for the influencer.
Right. How do you have those conversations internally? Because a lot of times you're communicating. If you're in charge of the relationship, you are all about, making sure you're giving up that creative control, but maybe reporting up to someone who's not comfortable with that because that's not the way that their world has worked. So how do you get internal buy-in on that creative, letting go of that creative, depending on, if you're like a huge corporation or it's just something you've never done before?
From my perspective, a lot of the people that are making these budget decisions and that are making decisions about campaigns have never opened Instagram. Their kids, the first thing they say is, oh yeah, my kids use that or something like that. And a lot of people are very savvy too, but just to make an example. So explaining it and explaining why it's different from traditional media is, I think, really helpful to people, and showing actual examples. And kind of explaining that this isn't a one-way street anymore. You're not putting something in direct mail and making assumptions about who's getting it or what that's changing. This is living, breathing, a two-way conversation between the brand and the customers. And I think that when people hear that, they start to get kind of excited about the potential. It's not just buying ad space. It's buying that story, that conversation. Right. So just getting people excited enough to understand that they need to take a different approach, I think, can really help.
We use the term co-create, and that says it all. And basically, if you think that you're going to be a ventriloquist and, my hand is back here and then you're going to say my words, like, that's not going to work.
You talked about the Drake commercial.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, I'm not going to summarize that well with a microphone, but if you saw the Super Bowl ad with Drake, he's sort of making fun of, of course I'll change my song for Verizon or whoever. Yeah. Maybe it was Sprint, I don't remember.
It's a good ad, right?
But yeah, you set expectations on day one. You say, look, if this is what you want to embark on, here's the terms. Yeah. And you have to say what the terms are for the influencer partner. We have to say what the terms are for the client. And it's almost like you're the marriage counselor, trying to broker this. It's even more complex than the brand and the influencer, because ultimately it's your audience. Right. They're involved too. So co-creation, I think, says it all. People hear that and they're like, okay, I get it. We have to find a middle ground here.
Right. I also think it ties back to goals. If it's not authentic, it's not going to reach goals, and there's no reason in doing it. So it's really setting yourself up for success very early on and getting that buy-in very early on, or else it doesn't make sense to do it.
gonna say something, Avner?
I worked at Samsung for a couple of years. And, they've done some, aggressive stuff on the social media side, and there was no understanding of the top tier of management about social media. There is a FOMO, like everybody's there, we need to do something there, the young kids are there, we don't understand what the young kids are doing, so you can probably get an experimental budget from your big company pretty easily. But then I think the best answer to the concern that higher ups in the company may have is just results. So if you can show that you increase sales or visits or whatever is your measurements, then they'll let you continue and increase your budget. And if you have to say no, but it's cool, then
Right.
it's going to stay in the experimental budget.
Let the results show for themselves. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the only way.
Yeah. Gabby, for you, what I thought was so interesting is you've seen SoulCycle and been part of the huge growth. Congratulations. And I would imagine those phone calls or conversations were a lot harder a couple of years ago and hopefully a lot easier now. So what have you noticed are some of the shifts in how you either position or pitch or come together with that bartered package?
I think what we've done, and to be honest, we've been working with influencers since we opened SoulCycle 10 years ago. It's just real influencers versus digital influencers, and that is how we've scaled the business. This has been a word of mouth business literally since day one. So that's it. And it's all about relationship, and that has not changed. I think what we really do is it's like really thinking about the why. Everything we do is what's the why. And is the why national reach? Is the why I want to get butts on bikes in Back Bay in Boston? Is it for our retail launch? Is it for our warehouse sale that's happening now in Soho? So I think it really is, again, it's not so much about, we're so much bigger now and we have a larger appeal and people want to be part of us in a different way. It's just, again, tying back to strategic goals, how we're driving business goals, and how these programs are going to impact that. And it just forces us to be that much more focused and strategic versus selective. I think, of course, we're selective, and we're not going to throw spaghetti against the wall and see what sticks. But we are very focused on how we are partnering with influencers to drive business goals.
Great. How do you know if you're not able to? Say you're not SoulCycle because you have such a affinity. There's such an excitement around the affinity of the brand, and maybe you're more of a traditional corporation where it would just feel too endorsement-y to do bartered. How do you know what you're getting is a good deal? How do you know where to price the package? It can feel, I think, sometimes like a black box because it is so new and it is so wide of a spectrum in terms of the influence or the reach that someone has. So where do you all start? What is the data or the comp research that you look into to make those decisions and understand if you're getting a good deal?
I think most marketers, let's use a CMO at a big brand as an example. Basically, that person once a year is being asked, all the money you spent this year, where did it go? What worked? What are you going to do different next year? So sadly, if you put $1 million into an influencer buy, and you put $1 million into an email marketing campaign, and you put $1 million into paid search, at some point, those are all going to stack up against each other, hopefully with a common denominator. So although if you're talking about trust, if you're talking about talent, if you're talking about passion and relationships, those are different. You can't shake that down into the same as a click-through rate. But we have to. I'll build that pivot table, and hopefully it stacks up well, and hopefully it stacks up better than well. But you have to oversimplify it in order to make those comparisons.
That's great.
Right.
Ronen?
For me, it's really kind of all about multiples. So if you have $1 million that you're spreading across the board in 3 different packages, how are you? The first thing I like to do is say, have you worked with influencers before? Who are they? Send me what you did, and then I will I'll run the numbers and be able to tell you if it was successful. And then we can look at that one person and what you paid them and what the results were, and then we can, like I mentioned before, turn that into working with 10 people or 20 people instead of just one person. And what's cool about that is you then change the KPI a little bit. So rather than one person creating X amount of content and doing one thing, well, now you have one person or 10 people creating 10x the content. And that content can then be repackaged and then even driven to and hedged with paid efforts, which is really interesting. So we found ways to get into bigger budgets by using paid media as well. and borrowing from there, or content budgets, or it's however you want to kind of like spin that sell. But what I think every influencer transaction breaks down to three things as far as compensation goes. You can compensate an influencer three ways, and remember, we're dealing with micro influencers, so you can, there's lots of levers you can pull. But you can basically, cash is king. Yes, you can pay anybody to do anything, sure, and there will always be someone who has their hand out, and there's people who won't. Exposure is the second thing. Do you have an account for your own brand where you can expose that individual's content to a much larger audience, thereby kind of creating a unified co-creative effort? And then there is swag and experience bundled together. And the Sony campaign is awesome because it was swag, it was experience, it was exposure. I mean, if you can hit as many of those things as possible, the campaign is going to be as successful as possible. SoulCycle can deal in the currency of an awesome experiential workout all day, which also burns calories, and people love that. So, and there's a monetary factor that's implemented in your mind to it as well. But, how are you playing with those swag, experience, money, or exposure, and what levers can you pull to really get anyone to work with you for whatever your goal might be?
That's great. I feel like influencers respect that too. It almost feels, because they're not just a media property, they're a person. And so if you're just coming with cash, it can feel transactional and there's no passion behind it.
Well,
and so
that's my problem with. So the most investable area of the influencer marketing landscape is what's called marketplaces. And there are lots of them out there. In fact, if I had raised money a year ago, I probably would have built one. So I'm really glad that we didn't do that. But an influencer marketplace is a race to the bottom any way you cut it. First off, you're limited by the amount of people you can work with. Two, even though they'll claim 40,000, 100,000, whatever it is, that also just puts more work on you, the client, which sucks at the end of the day. And it's eBay. It's eBay for influencers. I have $10,000 in shiny things here. Who's going to do the most work for the least? Who wins in that equation? No one. There's no qualitative control. There's no curatorial oversight. The only person who wins essentially is the person with their hand out. It's impossible to align on any qualitative KPIs when you do that.
That's a great point.
Even the person with their hand out loses because they're getting 10% of what they could have got if they were approached. Yeah, I have a problem with all these places too. Not all of them. I think some of them are very good, but the ones that say we have 40,000 influencers, like, what does that mean? And it's look for people that are high quality, that are easy to work with. There's so many people out there. Like, don't spend your time with somebody who's being a pain. Just walk away. There's so many other great people out there that are excited to do this stuff. But I agree with everything you guys are saying. The thing that I was trying to do when I was working in advertising and kind of putting these campaigns together was saying, looking at the budget, saying, okay, you guys have $50,000 in budget for a photographer. Why don't we hire somebody? Why don't we give that money to somebody who also has 500,000 followers? So I'm not asking for more budget from you. I'm taking the budget that exists and I'm saying, here's how we can make it even more efficient and get things that you would normally cost another $50,000. Another way to do that is, for example, let's say I approach somebody and they say, hey, I need $20,000 to do this amount of posts for you. You say, okay, well, we only have $10,000, but here's what we're going to do. We have $80,000 in paid media going out on the platform. We're gonna give you credit, and we're gonna put your handle into those media buys. So all of a sudden, that influencer, instead of getting $20,000, they're getting $10,000 and an $80,000 media buy, and nobody's spending more money, but everybody's winning. And then the brand wins from the association with that artist because people see the post, they see the authenticity, there's a deeper story when they click through, and it's just, let's work with what we have to make things more efficient and even better like that.
Great. I want to make sure we have time for Q&A too. Are we good to do one more question, then open up? Great. What does this role look like? Because that could be something that I would imagine if you're new to it. I know when we fired our agency, we took everything in-house to do something. We were like, where are we going to find the person to replace this? It feels like they're this unicorn that you just can't get because it's such a new industry. So one, how do you adjust as a marketing person or professional to better kind of serve this new marketing niche? Or two, if you are hiring somebody, what should you look for? Like what previous job titles or experience or personality traits to make sure that you're bringing the right person in-house to do it, or you're adjusting in the right way?
I think I'll make it quick. The number one thing is look at their social media. I mean, if you can tell instantaneously if somebody knows what they're doing on social media because of the presence that they have. If somebody came to me and gave me an application, I don't know how you guys feel about this, but the first thing I would do, I don't care where they went to college, like it doesn't really matter, or if they went to college. I would look at their entire social media presence and say, does this person understand the job of making a social media channel compelling, consistent, engaging? Are they doing the work? And I would hire the person who can prove that over anybody who went to any ad school or anything like that personally. But
Great.
I would say the same thing, but slightly differently. But largely, we're exactly aligned. I feel like influencers are experts on platforms that most marketers don't know how to use. So you're paying for an expert to basically either teach you or do it for you. So if you're going to hire someone in-house who's vetting those experts, they better be as close to an expert as possible on that channel.
That's a great point.
they don't have to be like an influencer, or they don't have to be an influencer themselves, but they should have a basic understanding of how to present on that channel.
Right.
Because,
If they're like, I'm living offline, you're like, probably not gonna do the job. Yeah.
okay.
I like to disconnect. Gabby,
I
yeah.
think someone who can connect with other human beings is pretty key, and who's outgoing and who's comfortable approaching strangers and asking them for things. I think that's not an easy thing to do, and it's not an easy thing to find.
Avner?
Yeah, I'm more in the Gabby camp, I guess. Just my experience, if you're too influential, sometimes, maybe, your head is in a different place. Yeah. You have your own brand that you need to take care of. The job is a job, but really, you care a lot about your social presence rather than anything else. So I agree that, when we look for people or work with people, we look for people that know what they're doing online. But if they have just 600 followers on their Twitter or Instagram account, I don't care. I'm much more optimizing on, is this person smart? Can they relate to people? Can they make good, personal connection over the phone, Skype, in person? And, it's not rocket science. It's, then it's kind of a sales job.
Yeah.
So you need the traits of a salesperson that is digitally fluent and not an asshole always.
Not an asshole. That's the golden rule to life. Amen. Brandon, anything you want to add before we turn over the audience?
Well, I meet with a lot of brands every day, and depending on the type, so usually I'm talking to the exact right person who I need to be talking to, if I've made it to them. And depending on how forward-thinking the organization is, well, does influencer fall under marketing? Does it fall under social media? Yeah. Does it fall under a specific influencer desk, which is like something that I'm seeing more and more of every day? Or is this something that nobody really knows who the stakeholder is, in which case you don't really want to talk to that brand. But one thing that I do that's like an amazing trick, in an interview, I ask somebody to show me their cell phone, and you look at what's on the home screen.
Shit, that could get dangerous. Yeah.
And it depends, if Snapchat's there, if Instagram is there.
Yeah.
What are the apps, what are the profiles and protocols that somebody's using the most frequently?
What app would you see on site?
Well, if those
MySpace.
aren't there, it's more.
No,
it's more.
there
Yeah,
something
MySpace.
Tinder.
Tumblr.
Well, they're making a lot of relationships with Tinder.
No offense, Tumblr.
Let me send it to your personal email. Oh, it's AOL.com?
Yeah,
Never mind.
Exactly. Hotmail. Oh, okay. Does anyone have any questions from the audience?
I don't deal a lot with the influencer realm, but it always strikes me that when you see a big brand with an influencer, you presume dumb money from the big brand because they seem to have the most resources to be paying influencers. Number one, is that true? And secondly, do you see signs of an influencer bubble? And if so, where? Where are you seeing it? Platform, by industry, whatever.
So the first part of your question, I don't necessarily make that alignment because brands are getting smarter and smarter. Yes, you can assume dumb money. and it's fun to have money to play with. Don't get me wrong, but it really is about the execution. I know some very smart, influential people who are working with brands that might not have touched the influencer world before, and now they are, and they're trying to do interesting things. The creator, the influencer themselves, is getting more savvy. So if they're getting savvier, they're kind of upping the game of the big brands as well. And then the second part of your question was what again? Oh yeah, bubble. Yes, bubble at the top all day. Like whatever's a mega influencer, like the cost going into it, Kim Kardashian and FTC violations, skinny tea, like all this stuff, like it is. Like it's bursting at that end, and I actually feel like this is comparable to the housing market in 2008. Like everything there is like completely, like we're watching it like burn slowly, and that's why the inexhaustible supply of smaller individuals are really where it's at. Just one interesting stat on that: the search volume for the word micro influencer in the last 3 months has gone up 10,000% on Google search. So people are starting to look for this idea.
Engaging influencers and micro-influencers, which brands do you think are doing a really good job of it? And for SoulCycle, which brands do you try, even though you're doing a great job with it, which brands do you look at and sort of look at with a little bit of envy, wishing that you could be at that level as well? And then for you, which brands do you like to work with who are actually reaching out effectively?
I'm happy to answer. Again, like I think the Sony experience, just from not from my own personal experience, which was I loved it, it was amazing, but just from the amount of feedback we got, and like we came back to New York and hosted a photo meet, and 20 different people came up to me and asked. The first thing they said to me, like just meeting me, was like, "How is that Sony thing? Oh my God!" And that really crystallized the ideas I was having about why this was effective. So I think that was really a good one. I mean, some other ones I love, Airbnb, amazing. They're doing amazing work. I think it's really good. I think Nike is one of like the top brands on Instagram. It might be the top brand on Instagram. They're doing it in a way that is just like they're hiring really creative photographers to go out and make compelling work that all fits the same kind of aesthetic, and it's pretty incredible to see that cohesion going on between tons of different artists all over the world, and splitting out different verticals for like Nike running, Nike women, Nike, everything they've got. One more example.
Nike has been doing it also in the real world for many years.
Yeah, they transitioned in a way that it couldn't have been smarter.
Yeah, I have a friend that is not, he's more influential than me, but he's not like a big guy, but he's contract with Nike, basically. Not contract, but they have like this very boilerplate. And whenever he goes on a panel, he wears his Nike. And he has an unlimited supply of Nikes. And that's awesome. That's awesome, right?
It's really small, but if anyone's recently seen the launch of The Wing, does anybody know what The Wing is? Audrey Gelman's new launch. I mean, the way that she has slowly launched that brand and the space I thought was ingenious. And the way she seeded with influencers and, really used her network of friends, it just, for me, that was genius and so smart and so on brand. I mean, it's her, but really leveraging her personal network. The Wing, sorry, that was really loud.
Can you explain a little bit too about what
The
it is?
Wing is a women's club. It's basically a modern day women's club that it opened probably 2 weeks ago, and she's been working on it for a long time. She has an incredibly rich network of women friends, and she has seeded the opening over the last year through her network of influencers, and it's everyone from Sophia Amorosa to Lena Dunham, and everyone in between, and really leveraging those relationships to put out content for the launch of The Wing, and the final launch has been remarkable.
I have a very different answer. I used to have Dunkin' Donuts as a client, and we did a lot of influencer work, and I think if you look at any one of the given posts or activations, you'd say, it's okay. But I think that the part of what they were doing that was so smart that maybe is a takeaway for any of you that want to go into this is they would pick 6 tentpole activations a year. For each one, they would pick 5 completely different influencers, and basically they had 30 bets on the table for the year. And they were learning a lot, right? So what works better? This size. What works better? This person, that person. This tactic, this channel, this whatever. you basically have to try a bunch of things, see what's working, and keep learning and keep incorporating those learnings. So I think that approach is very smart.
Absolutely. So to that point, we actually are able to do that within a campaign. So rather than spreading the bets across the whole year, say you want to work with 10 people for a specific execution, well, cream's going to rise to the top. You double down on those people. You don't continue with the people who are running at the bottom, and you can just keep working with those individuals because they're doing something, talking to an audience that is being responsive.
Great. I love how there's so many things that are different because of this new market, but there's also so many similarities, like taking thoughtful planning and A/B testing essentially and creating a meaningful experience. It's great how just some classics translate. We have time for one more question. You had your hand up before we wrap up? Yeah.
Super quick. So going back to sort of the idea of money and large brands spending that money, what are some of the standard KPIs that you see in the industry to make sure that it's not dumb money? Like your return on investment, like how do you measure that? Is it selling X number of widgets, or is it something more?
I mean, brand awareness, but that's obviously hard to measure, I think, but that's, for us, a huge play if we're not looking just at Butts on Bites, but looking at national brand awareness, or we're opening in Toronto in March. So how are we going to partner with influencers to open in an entirely new market?
I think you want to look at sustained ambient lift. That's a lot of buzzwords in one phrase, but typically with an activation, if you look at any metric over time, you're going to see a spike and then a collapse. Maybe it's more like a slide, and then it falls. If you can see some sort of ambient lift, like if you average that out and use, I don't know, I forget what it's called. There's some math term that like softens that. If you see it's largely moving up and the spikes are falling a little bit less and then spiking and falling a little bit less, that's a good sign, because that means you actually won someone over. You didn't just achieve discovery, you achieved re-engagement and loyalty.
That's great. Great. So I think that's it for us. Thank you all. That was a fantastic panel. You all were so great, and for all your questions.